Hey, What's Your Self Talk? Jabari is here from What's Your Self Talk podcast. And listen, I want you to download Anchor right now. Because chances are you're listening to this and you're saying, I got some things I want to share. I have some things that I've wanted to put in a podcast form. Here's the opportunity. Anchor is free. You can do it from your phone and you can be on all the different podcast stations all in one app. Okay. So what I need you to do is stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect time. Analysis paralysis. Do it now. You'll thank me later. What's your self-talk? Hey, what's your self-talk? This is Jabari, and I'm here with another episode of What's Your Self-Talk. Hey guys, I really enjoyed this last week. I did something that I believe we all need to do, and I think it's important for everyone to take some time to be able to reflect, disconnect so you can connect. So let me give you a little backstory. So every year, we and some other couples get together and do a marriage retreat. This is our 4th year doing it, and it's just so refreshing because what it really allows me and my wife to do is, for one, get around others who have the same values, who have the same drive, who have the same core values that we share. And we get a chance to get away from kids. So every single one of the families have at least one child. And we all get together and we just really take time to debrief, to reflect just on life, where we're at as far as in the season. And then we disconnect, from work, all the things that really pull us mentally, so therefore we can be as fully present as we want to, though therefore we can connect. We can be able to connect more with our spouses. We can connect more with what's going on inside of us that we need to walk through and process and talk about. And it's just a great time. It's more than I can put in words. And so, those are some of the things I'm just going to break down today. Is just that reflect, disconnect so you can connect. And so number one, I think reflect. So this podcast has always been something around personal development. What is something that you can do to grow, to be able to expand your potential? And so my question I'll ask you is, what's your self-talk? So what are the things that you need to do to reflect and see what are the areas I'm neglecting? Because generally when you are reflecting, you start to see things that you're missing, or maybe hey, I need to spend more time in this area. And mine specifically was, hey, I want to spend more time in my spiritual growth, because I see me as a leader of my household and someone who wants to continue to grow spiritually and lead my family in the correct way, is that I have not made enough time for myself to spend more time in my spiritual growth. And as I had a chance to do that, I was able to make more connections. I was able to make more sense of, hey, why have I been struggling, in certain areas, why I've been struggling here. And so I say all that to say is that find the time, not only that you can be able to get away, this one was for a little bit over 4 days. And it's so important because when we allow ourselves to just take some time to be quiet and to reflect, you start to realize, man, I do need to work more on this. And I think the key indicators that you can catch in your own life is when you go throughout the day and you say, man, I used to do that a lot and I do not make enough time for that. Whatever that is, whether it is, spending more time spiritually or personal development or what you're doing now, or, physically working out, or spending more time with family, whatever that little hint or something that you need to spend more time doing, it's so important to find time to be quiet, to retreat so that you can reflect. And so that's what I've gathered in me personally. Getting back to focusing more on some of the spiritual growth that allowed me to make better choices for my life, for my family, and the work that we do and the impact that we have. And I challenge you, what is something you can reflect on? What is your self-talk when it comes to you need to reflect in this area, okay? And so in order, I believe, for you to reflect, you need to disconnect. So one thing that I did was disconnect from social media. I disconnect from Instagram, Facebook, emails, try to get away from as many phone calls and text messages as possible. And it really allowed me to free up my mind to just not try to process a lot. And I think one of the things that I am constantly reminded of in a world that is so many distractions that we bring upon ourselves, it's so interesting is when you go and you're personally choosing to disconnect from those apps, and you realize sometimes when you pick up your phone, you have so many different apps and it's only so many ones that you open up, and you unconsciously try to go to them and open them. So that's what I was catching myself doing. I caught myself so many times going to an app and getting ready to click on it. And then I'm like, what are you doing? This is not what you told yourself this is what you're doing. So I've canceled the app so many times. And it's just when you start to notice how much energy, how much effort you put into just going to go wander into social media, I think that's dangerous. And it reminded me of a quote that Zig Ziglar said. He said, either you're going to be a wandering generality or meaningful specific. So when we wander onto social media, Facebook, Instagram, will we start to wander 5 minutes away, 10 minutes away, 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, or hour and hours away? All for what? What was the purpose? Instead of being a meaningful specific. And I understand, like, when you are more meaningful with your time, maybe you set aside 5 or 10 minutes in a certain part of the day to maybe check those things, instead of just unconsciously going to it when you don't have anything else to do. Your brain is just saying, hey, go do that, because you have wired yourself to do that. And this is something personally that I want to work on, and I hope you join that course with me. But maybe you'll see if you send me a message on some of the social media outlets that I may not get back to you as quickly, but I will. Maybe I missed it, or it was a time frame and I didn't get to it. It's okay. I get to it when I was supposed to. But I think what is more important is the peace of mind that you allow yourself to have when you become more specific about how you use your time and what are the things you're going to these social media outlets. And just to be able to disconnect from those things so that you can spend more time with your loved ones. You know, I had a chance to be away with my wife and just to engage in conversation with her and just with friends, and not trying to pick up my phone and when everybody is talking and trying to be on my phone, whether it's work or social media, and just taking the time to be present. And we had so many great conversations, which led to connect. So when you reflect, disconnect to connect. So our marriage retreat, we have some great friends. One of them is a life coach, and she is very good at having couch kind of conversations. You know, so around 5:00 we would get around and just as all couples and just have open conversation and dialogue and intellectual conversation, as my wife loves so much, and I'm horrible at it, and I'm work at. That is a weakness, and that's a strength of my wife. She loves to have the intellectual conversations, meaningful conversations, nothing surface level, but deep things. And that's something that we did, and it just allowed me to just work on that. I know that that's something that she values, and I was able to not only tap into that, but I was able to hear others, husbands and other wives, discuss that among each other. And when they was able to talk about, life, marriage, kids, things that we're doing that works, struggles that we're going through right now, how we're overcoming them. And when you hear all these things and when you realize, man, that's interesting, we have that in common, or that's interesting, because when you have those conversations with others, the best thing that I love is that it starts to give you words for things you are struggling to maybe figure out. And that is the most powerful thing for me, because you ever have, you read a book, or maybe you were listening to a podcast like you're doing now, or you listen to looking at a YouTube video or something where it's some form of education, and somebody says something, and what they say allows you to better understand, like that's what I've been trying to say. And like I think about it in a context of the Bible, is a lot of the things that Jesus did, he talks in metaphors. And whether you believe or not a believer, it's the concept of metaphors. It paints a picture, because most of the time when people cannot make great points, they use metaphors to try to connect the dots. And most of the time, it's those metaphors that help us to connect the dots. And when you have those conversations, sometimes metaphor come out, but some other people spend so much more time in areas that you maybe are inexperienced in, when it comes to, just tons of things. Going back to the career, or the spiritual growth, or your family, or values, or finances, or fitness. Like when you start thinking about, hey, this is what this person is thinking about, or they have deep dived into those areas to start figuring out their own struggles, then you can start to understand, man, you know what? I think that kind of is what I'm dealing with, or that's what I'm struggling with. And that is so rich, because you can only get that when you decide to be able to disconnect, so you can start connecting in your mind, connecting the things that you need to grow, to fulfill your potential. And why I think that is so important, because we only have so much time here on this earth. And one of the things that I look at is, my kid is going to look back and listen to this podcast, and he's going to say, what did my dad go through, when I was, 14, 15 months, and, how did he process life? How did he deal with it? And this is something that I want to be archived, so he can be able to hear, so he can be able to understand, like, oh, wow, that's how he was processing life. How cool will it have been if we could be able to go back and listen to some of the great people that we admire in their early days, before they have a big name of recognition. People like the Martin Luther Kings, or the Michael X, or people like the early Steve Jobs, or just many of any people that we admire today that may be still alive, but we just we like to see, how did they overcome that? What were some different struggles that they went through? And I say all that to say is, me documenting this is not only so important because I want to help you, and I want to help you understand how to continue to grow and to fulfill your potential, but I also want to help my child, my kids, and my grandkids to be able to say, man, okay, so you deal with that as well. How many of us do not know some of our own family stories of, what are the things that they, deal with? What are the generational curses or struggles that we had that somebody broke and I don't know? So, those are the things that not only when we talk about, but the thing I start reflecting on, and I start saying, how can I be better in those areas? So I think having friends who value this thing that you value, and connecting with those people is so important. And guess what? Sometimes if you don't have those people, or you don't feel like you do, that is the power of, this podcast. That is the power of building community. And that's ultimately one of the goals that I want to be able to do. And that's will allow me to be more specific about how I use my time, because I'll check on my community that I'm growing within the What's Your Self-Talk podcast. And that's coming soon. More specifics are going to be coming on that. So definitely stay tuned, and definitely more teaching in some of the business things that we do. But I just wanted to wrap this podcast up just to let you know is try to find time to reflect, disconnect so you can connect. And maybe you don't do it with friends. Maybe you can just do it by yourself. I don't know what worked for you, but I challenge you to go do it. Maybe you can do it for one day. Maybe you can do it for 2 days. Maybe you have to do it only for a couple hours. I don't know. But the job is that I'm going to continue to find ways to do that on a consistent basis, because I see how freeing it is and how much I am able to make progress in my own life, and how I am better as a leader, as a husband, as a father, and all the other titles that I carry. And so what I encourage you to do is not only share this podcast, but let me know your thoughts. Let me know what questions I can answer. What are some of the things that you've listened to everything since maybe the first podcast, and you started to say, I wonder what you think about this, or, how you doing in this area? You talked about this at one point, can you give more flesh to that? So thank you for listening. For everyone, I've definitely been looking at some of the downloads, and I'm super grateful for seeing some consistent listeners and people who are listening in and just listening more about What's Your Self-Talk. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I look forward to being able to continue to encourage you next week. But until then, I want you to go, and I want you to reflect, disconnect, and so you can connect. And so in order to do that, you got to see where you're at, and you got to ask that one question. What's your self-talk? Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend.